That night, my husband Derek kicked me out and slammed the door without ever looking back. Just hours earlier, I still believed there was love in this house. I had just entered my 9th month of pregnancy. But deep inside, something felt wrong. I didn't realize it was a warning. I had no idea how cruel Derek and his mother Patricia could be. Or that this quiet autumn night would be the last peaceful moment of my life. At the end of October, in a quiet residential neighborhood in suburban Chicago, golden autumn leaves danced in the wind, creating a scene as beautiful as a movie frame in the twilight. The Rivera house at 47 Maple Street, with its white exterior walls accented by red brick, was the epitome of the American dream. However, behind this beautiful facade, a woman's heart was quietly beginning to shatter. Natalie cradled her swollen belly with both hands, as if holding a heavy secret, as she sank into the cream-colored sofa in the living room. Her beautiful Mexican features were shadowed not by the glow of pregnancy, but by an inexplicable anxiety. The cheerful laughter from a talk show on television echoed in stark contrast to the heaviness in her heart. Something has changed. This thought that surfaced in Natalie's mind was like a scream from her soul. It was an indescribable unease that had begun around her 2nd trimester. At first, she thought it was just sentimental mood changes, due to pregnancy. But as days passed, it became clear that this wasn't about her physical condition. Her husband, Derek Anthony Rivera. At 32, he possessed features so perfectly sculpted they seemed carved from Greek mythology. A graduate of a prestigious Boston University working at a top investment firm in Chicago, he was flawless not only in appearance but in credentials. To Natalie, in the early days of their marriage, he was truly a Prince Charming. However, that prince's mask was beginning to peel away, piece by piece. There's no love left in Derek's eyes. Accepting this cruel reality was like having her heart torn apart. Before, when he came home from work, he would always embrace Natalie and gently speak to their unborn baby, saying, "It's Daddy." In those moments, his eyes sparkled with deep love for his wife and their coming child. But now it was different. When she heard the front door open, Natalie's heart no longer leaped. Because standing there wasn't her loving husband, but a stranger who looked at her with the cold gaze one might give a troublesome roommate. "Welcome home, honey." Even when Natalie greeted him with her brightest smile, all she received in return was a mechanical "I'm home." Then he would head straight to his study, as if ignoring his wife's very existence. Even mealtimes bore no trace of their once sweet newlywed life. The days of sharing love under candlelight now seemed like distant dreams. Present day. Derek ate in silence while staring at the television, as if his pregnant wife sitting before him were invisible. The baby moved so much today. When Natalie tried to talk about their unborn child, Derek showed obvious displeasure. "I'll listen later." Those cold words pierced Natalie's heart like arrows of ice. She understood painfully that her pregnancy was not a joy but merely a burden to her husband. Making this desperate situation even worse was the presence of her mother-in-law, Patricia Eloise Rivera. At 58, Patricia had the refined appearance of someone who'd stepped out of a classic film. With her silver hair perfectly styled and always dressed elegantly, she might appear to be the ideal mother-in-law at first glance. However, beneath that beautiful exterior lurked a terrifyingly calculating woman who adored her son and saw her daughter-in-law as an enemy. In front of her, even breathing becomes a sin. Patricia visited her son and daughter-in-law's home 3, sometimes 4 times a week. Ostensibly it was to care for my daughter-in-law's pregnancy, but her true purpose was to find fault with Natalie and poison her son's mind against his wife. "Natalie, sitting like that isn't good for the baby. Isn't that seasoning too salty?" In my day, pregnant women didn't indulge themselves so much. Patricia's criticisms continued to pierce Natalie's heart like 1,000 needles. Most cruel of all was that these criticisms wore the mask of good intentions. While appearing to worry about her daughter-in-law on the surface, she was actually trying to erode Natalie's confidence and steal her place in this home. Natalie doesn't do housework properly. She's using pregnancy as an excuse to be lazy. He should have chosen a more capable woman. Derek never contradicted Patricia's poisonous words. Worse still, lately he had begun agreeing with his mother's opinions, sometimes even joining her in criticizing Natalie. "My mother is very experienced," Derek would say coldly. "You should listen to her humbly." When she heard these words, Natalie felt her heart shatter audibly. Her beloved husband was taking his mother's side, not hers. This reality was more painful than any physical suffering. Natalie acutely felt her complete isolation within this beautiful house. Her husband and mother-in-law seemed to be conspiring to exclude her. However, being pregnant and completely financially dependent, she couldn't fight back strongly. She had become like a bird trapped in a beautiful cage. Things will change after giving birth. They have to change, Natalie told herself, in a trembling voice. But deep in her heart, she knew the likelihood of this hellish situation magically improving after childbirth was slim. In fact, the baby's arrival might bring even more complex and cruel circumstances. That night, 3 people sat in the living room, but only Derek and Patricia were having a conversation. Despite being in the same room, Natalie was ignored as if she existed in another dimension. Their conversation was clearly filled with barbs directed at her. "Young women these days really lack patience," Patricia said in a voice deliberately loud enough for Natalie to hear. "In our time, no matter how difficult things got, we endured without complaining." Derek nodded deeply at his mother's words. "You're absolutely right. Everything gets blown out of proportion. I wish she would be stronger." Listening to this cruel conversation, Natalie felt her heart freezing over. But she no longer had the strength to argue back. The dull pain in her lower abdomen that had started in the evening was gradually intensifying as the night deepened. At first, she thought it was Braxton Hicks contractions common in late pregnancy, but this pain was clearly different from anything she'd experienced before. It was an ominous pain, like a warning signal from deep within her body. "It's okay, it has to be okay." Natalie desperately tried to calm herself. But the fear that something might be happening to her beloved baby inside began to dominate her mind. Being her first pregnancy, she couldn't distinguish the line between normal and abnormal. The doctor had told her to contact us immediately if you feel anything abnormal, but showing weakness in this house's cold atmosphere would only invite further criticism and contempt. The clock hands pointed to 10 p.m. Outside was already shrouded in darkness, with only the warm glow of streetlights gently illuminating the house windows. But contrary to this beautiful scene, Natalie's heart sank into the darkness of despair. Then, lightning like sharp pain struck her lower abdomen. The pain was so intense that Natalie gasped. The next moment, she felt warm liquid flowing down her thighs. Terror consumed her entire body. This was clearly abnormal. Something terrible was happening to her beloved baby in her womb. Natalie didn't yet know that this beautiful autumn night would be the last peaceful night in Natalie Carmen Rivera's life. Nor did she know that the hellish experience about to begin would ultimately lead her to true strength. Something's wrong, this isn't normal. This intuition that surfaced in Natalie's mind was like an emergency alarm from her maternal instincts. The sensation of warm liquid flowing down her thighs drained the color from her face. She tried to stand up from the sofa in panic, but her heavy belly and sudden fear made her legs nearly buckle. "Bathroom. I need to get to the bathroom." She tried to maintain composure while desperately attempting to leave the living room. However, Derek and Patricia remained absorbed in the television, showing no signs of noticing her distress. Or perhaps they noticed but chose to ignore it. Rushing into the bathroom, Natalie checked her underwear and was horrified. Her white cotton underwear was stained bright red. This wasn't just light bleeding. And clearly abnormal amount of blood was flowing. "Baby, please be okay." Natalie stroked her belly with trembling hands, praying desperately in her heart. For the 28-year-old, this was her long-awaited first child. After graduating from California State University and working 5 years in retail, she had welcomed this pregnancy after building her career. That's why her love for this baby was exceptionally deep. Coming out of the bathroom, another sharp pain shot through her lower abdomen. This time it was unbearably intense. Natalie braced herself against the wall to endure it, but realized she couldn't handle this situation alone. "Derek." Her trembling voice echoed throughout the house. That voice carried an urgency unimaginable from her usual self. "I'm bleeding. I need to go to the hospital." Natalie's face was pale when she returned to the living room, cold sweat beading on her forehead. However, what she saw wasn't her loving husband's worried expression, but clearly annoyed cold stares. Derek and Patricia turned toward Natalie simultaneously, as if they had coordinated it. But what showed in their expressions wasn't worry or sympathy, but obvious irritation and disgust. Like selfish children angry at having their peaceful TV time interrupted, petulant anger appeared on both their faces. "Here we go again." Patricia was the first to speak. Her voice was ice-cold and filled with contempt. "Natalie's specialty performance. Really, this girl will do anything for attention." The moment she heard these words, Natalie couldn't believe her ears. Performance? They were calling the terror and pain she was experiencing a performance? "It's not a performance." Natalie pleaded desperately. "I'm really bleeding. There's so much blood, the baby might be in danger." But Patricia's expression didn't change. If anything, she smiled even more coldly. "Blood? That's common during pregnancy. I've had 3 children, you know. I never made such a fuss like you." At this moment, Natalie realized a horrifying truth. Patricia's contempt hadn't started tonight. When her pregnancy was discovered, when she was suffering from morning sickness, when she was in pain during practice contractions, she had always been subjected to the same cold stares. But this isn't normal bleeding. Natalie's voice trembled with tears. But even those tears seemed like nothing more than acting to Patricia. Being dramatic again, Patricia sighed. "Pregnancy is something every woman goes through. Making such a fuss about it like it's something special, and causing trouble for everyone around you, it's truly selfish." At this moment, Derek slowly stood up. For an instant, Natalie hoped her husband might take her side. But the moment she saw his expression, that faint hope shattered into pieces. There wasn't a trace of the love Derek once showed her remaining in his eyes. All that remained was disgust and irritation. His gaze was as cold as if he were looking at a troublesome nuisance. "Enough already, Natalie." Derek's voice was as cold as wind from an iceberg. "Ever since you got pregnant, you've been like this. Making a big fuss over every little thing, trying to get our attention. I'm really sick of it." Natalie was speechless. Were these the words of the husband she had married for love? The partner who had vowed to walk through life together was throwing such cruel words at her. "That's not true." Natalie denied through tears. "I'm not acting. I'm really suffering. Please take me to the hospital. If this continues, the baby might." But Derek's expression became even harsher. "Are you threatening me again with the baby might?" He sneered. "Stop trying to control me by using pregnancy as a weapon." In this moment, Natalie understood everything. To her husband, her pregnancy wasn't a joy but only a burden. And the baby about to be born was nothing more than a weight to him as well. Patricia stood up and positioned herself in front of Natalie. Despite being 58, she radiated an intimidating presence like a prosecutor. condemning a defendant in court. You're really calculating, aren't you, Natalie? Patricia's voice was filled with venomous contempt. Treating my son like your slave. Using pregnancy as a shield to get everything your way. But those little tricks won't work. Little tricks. Natalie was stunned. I'm really suffering. This isn't a trick. In our time, Patricia continued coldly. No matter how painful things were, we endured without complaint. Causing trouble for our husbands was unthinkable. That was a woman's virtue. Natalie realized she was completely surrounded by the two of them. Her husband and mother-in-law were attacking her in perfect coordination, as if they had rehearsed it beforehand. But there's blood. I'm really bleeding. Natalie's voice was now hoarse. Blood? Derek laughed through his nose. You're probably exaggerating again. Last time you said your morning sickness was severe and went to the emergency room, but you were diagnosed as normal, weren't you? This is different from then. Natalie protested desperately. This time it's clearly abnormal. But Derek and Patricia's expressions didn't change. If anything, seeing Natalie's desperate pleas, the two exchanged glances and smirked bitterly. Like adults tired of dealing with a child's tantrum. In this moment, Natalie faced a terrifying reality. In this house, no one would understand her suffering. Neither her beloved husband nor her mother-in-law saw her as anything but an enemy. And even more terrifyingly, she had no way to escape this situation. 9 months pregnant with a heavy body, financial dependence, social isolation, everything bound her. The abdominal pain struck again. This time even more intensely, as if something deep inside her body was screaming. Natalie involuntarily clutched her belly and doubled over. The acting has started again, Patricia said coldly. At that moment, something definitively broke inside Natalie's heart. This wasn't acting. This was reality. And in this reality, only she could protect herself and her baby. As he looked down at Natalie kneeling on the floor, a terrifying change appeared in Derek's expression. His true nature, hidden until now, was finally revealed. Pure hatred with not a trace of love dwelled in his eyes. Like a demon who had cast off his mask, his true form emerged. I've reached my limit, Derek muttered in a low voice. That voice contained a cruelty she had never heard before. It had a terrifying resonance, like an ice blade piercing through the heart. Natalie was horrified by her husband's transformation. She had lived with this man for 3 years, yet she had never known his true nature. The reality that the person she thought was her loving husband was actually an enemy who hated her was unbearable. Derek, I really am. Shut up, Derek cut her off sharply. I'm sick of your lies. Stop wasting my time. His voice openly displayed the anger and contempt that had been hidden until now. It was as if the hatred he had accumulated over the years had finally exploded. Patricia stood behind her son. Their unity was perfect, as if they had rehearsed this beforehand. An expression of satisfaction unlike any she had ever shown appeared on the mother-in-law's face. My son has been patient long enough, Patricia's voice carried a triumphant tone. But he's reached his limit. I can't bear to watch my son suffer because of a woman like you. Natalie was confused by their words. What had she done? Was getting sick during pregnancy such a sinful thing? She thought she had devoted herself to her loving family, so why did she have to be treated this way? Did I do something wrong? Natalie asked desperately. Where did I make a mistake? Tell me. Something wrong? Derek mocked. Your very existence is wrong. Your intrusion into this house was the mistake. These words struck Natalie's heart like lightning. Her very existence was wrong? What did that mean? What was she living for? Do you know why I married you? Derek smiled cruelly. Because my mother told me to. She said, marry that woman and then dump her. Natalie stared at the two of them in disbelief. Was this a nightmare? Reality? She thought they had married for love, but it had all been a planned trap? It was planned, from the beginning? Natalie's voice trembled. Patricia nodded with satisfaction. Her expression showed the demonic joy of a long-planned scheme coming to fruition. That's right. I couldn't allow a woman of your inferior status to infiltrate our family. Did you think a poor girl with Mexican blood could become equal to my proud family's son? Patricia's words were poisoned with racial and class discrimination. So I told Derek. Marry her, get her pregnant, then dump her with some appropriate excuse. If she's pregnant, we can use the excuse that she was mentally unstable. In this moment, Natalie's world completely collapsed. What she thought was love was false, and the people she thought were family were enemies. And the baby in her womb was merely part of their cruel plan. But you loved me. Natalie protested desperately. At the wedding, you shed tears. Acting, Derek answered coldly. It was easy to deceive a simple woman like you. Show a little kindness and you believe immediately. What a stupid woman. Natalie's heart shattered into pieces. 3 years of married life, time spent together, nights when he whispered love. Had it all been lies? Were those I love yous also lies? Natalie asked through tears. Of course, Derek answered cruelly. I never loved you even once. I hated even touching you. But I had to endure it for the plan. Patricia echoed his words. Derek really endured well. Just imagining spending 3 years with a woman like you makes me sick. Sharp pain shot through her lower abdomen again. This time it was the most intense pain yet. Natalie involuntarily cried out and doubled over. But this pain wasn't merely physical. The pain in her heart was far more severe. Natalie pleaded through tears. It really hurts, the baby in my belly. Baby? Derek mocked. I don't even know if that child is really mine. It wouldn't be surprising if a woman like you had relations with other men too. These words completely trampled on Natalie's dignity. To have her chastity questioned, there was nothing more humiliating. What are you saying? Natalie muttered in disbelief. Besides you, I've never. Not even once. Do you have proof? Derek demanded coldly. I can't trust your words anymore. Still lying, he screamed, trembling with intense rage. I can't deal with your acting anymore. I've reached my limit. At that moment, a decisive event occurred. Derek powerfully kicked his 9 months pregnant wife in the side. Natalie collapsed to the floor from the impact. She curled up desperately, trying to protect the baby in her womb. The violence inflicted on her heavy, late pregnancy body caused serious damage to both her body and mind. Her entire body trembled with pain and fear. Derek, why? Tears overflowed from Natalie's eyes. She couldn't accept the reality that the love she had believed in had instantly turned to hatred. Even seeing her son's violence, Patricia maintained a satisfied expression. A terrifying joy appeared on her face, as if a long-cherished desire had finally been fulfilled. Finally. Patricia said triumphantly. Now we are free from the troublemaker. We don't need a woman who would taint our family bloodline. Lying on the floor, Natalie had to confront this cruel reality. What she thought was love was a trap, and the people she thought were family were enemies. And she had been destined for elimination from the very beginning. Our baby. Natalie clung to her last hope. I don't even know if that child is really mine, Derek declared coldly. It doesn't matter. I wish you would both just disappear. Get out, Derek began walking toward the entrance. His steps had a lightness as if he had shed a long-carried burden. A woman like you doesn't belong in this house. You never should have been here from the start. Natalie crawled after her husband. But with the pain from being kicked and her heavy pregnant body, she couldn't move as she wanted. Derek, wait. At least let's talk. Think about the baby in my belly. There's nothing to talk about. Derek opened the front door. Get out. Don't ever come back. The cold October night wind blew into the house. Outside it was already midnight, with only streetlights illuminating the darkness. You and that thing in your belly, I don't need either of you in my life. Derek pushed his wife outside in her thin pajamas. Go die somewhere else. That's the fitting end for you. The door slammed shut forcefully. The sound of the lock clicking echoed in the night's silence. Natalie was left alone in the cold entrance. From inside the house, she could hear Derek and Patricia raising toasts in celebration, as if celebrating the success of their long-planned scheme. Finally, it's over, Patricia's voice could be heard. Now we can protect our family's honor. Natalie understood her situation. 9 months pregnant, lightly dressed, midnight, cold outside air. And complete rejection from her beloved husband and mother-in-law. This wasn't just a marital fight. This was planned abandonment. The baby in her belly moved. As if sensing its mother's despair, tiny hands and feet pushed against her abdominal wall. I'm sorry, Natalie spoke to her belly through tears. Because mommy was weak, this happened. But in this desperate situation, a small flame ignited in Natalie's heart. It was maternal instinct. No matter what, she had to protect this child. Even if the whole world turned against them. At that moment, lights came on in the house across the street. The window curtains opened slightly, and she could see someone looking in her direction. Natalie lowered her face in shame and despair. Surely the neighbors had seen her pathetic state. A woman 9 months pregnant in pajamas, sitting on the doorstep in the middle of the night. How must she look? From inside the house, Derek and Patricia's laughter could still be heard. Their voices rang out like a victory song celebrating the success of their long-planned scheme. Natalie searched her trembling hands through her pockets, but her pajamas contained neither a cell phone nor a wallet. Everything was inside the house, a place she could never return to again. What should I do? Natalie's voice was swallowed by the night wind. Looking around, the quiet residential neighborhood had completely fallen asleep. Only the streetlights cast warm orange light, but even that light couldn't ease her despair. The abdominal pain struck again. The spot where Derek had kicked her throbbed, and she felt the baby in her belly moving violently. It was as if the child sensed its mother's crisis and was desperately crying for help. Baby, it's okay, Natalie whispered, while gently stroking her belly. Mommy will protect you. But how could she protect it? No money, no change of clothes, no one to rely on. In this desperate situation, there was little a 28-year-old pregnant woman could do alone. She considered calling an ambulance, but was afraid of the neighbors knowing about the commotion. Derek and Patricia would surely explain it as an emotionally unstable pregnant woman causing a disturbance. And the people around would certainly believe their words. Natalie sat down on the sidewalk. The cold concrete was stealing her body heat, but she had no strength left to stand. Tears fell down her cheeks, but even those seemed likely to freeze in the cold. After a while, the front door of the house across the street opened. An elderly man came out into the yard and looked in Natalie's direction. Without hesitation, the man crossed the street and approached Natalie. Are you all right? His voice was surprisingly gentle and warm. Natalie looked up at the man. He appeared to be around 65 with white hair, and his deeply wrinkled face bore an expression full of compassion. Wearing a thick sweater and slippers, he had clearly rushed out of his house. I'm Vincent Hartwell, the man introduced himself. Please call me Vince. You seem to be in trouble. Natalie was speechless. When was the last time she had experienced such kindness from a stranger? Having grown accustomed to the cruel treatment from Derek and Patricia, this warmth was shocking to her. I'm sorry, Natalie answered through tears. I don't want to trouble you. But I'm pregnant and there's bleeding. And my husband threw me out of the house. Vince's expression immediately became serious. Having worked for the Chicago Fire Department for 35 years, he understood all too well how abnormal this situation was. Throwing a woman in late pregnancy out of the house at midnight was an act against humanity. That's terrible, Vince said with concern. My wife Dennis is a former obstetrics nurse. She worked at the General Hospital for 32 years. Let's have her take a look. Vince took off his sweater and placed it around Natalie's shoulders. The sweater was filled with domestic gentleness, carrying the scent of detergent and human warmth. But you must be busy, at this hour of the night. Natalie hesitated. Busy? Vince smiled. When it comes to helping people in trouble, there's no such thing as busy or free time. Besides, I can't leave a pregnant woman alone in the middle of the night. I've been a firefighter for 35 years, and helping people has nothing to do with time. Natalie was moved to tears by Vince's warmth. This stranger was treating her more preciously than her own husband. Thank you, Natalie said in a trembling voice. Vince supported Natalie as they slowly headed toward his house. Natalie's steps were heavy, and she sometimes had to stop due to abdominal pain, but Vince never rushed her. It's okay, Vince said encouragingly. Dennis has attended thousands of births. She's helped injured pregnant women during rescue operations. She'll surely be able to help. Entering the Hartwell house, warm air enveloped Natalie. The house had the warmth of years of accumulated love. Family photos decorated the walls, handmade cushions were placed in the living room. There was an old leather chair by the fireplace, and well-read books lined the bookshelves. Unlike Derek and Patricia's house, this was the warmth of a real home. Dennis. Vince called for his wife. Emergency. From the back room, a 62-year-old woman appeared. Dennis Marie Hartwell. She had silver hair tied back and gentle eyes. Though she wore a cardigan over her nightgown, the moment she saw Natalie, her expression instantly transformed into that of a professional. How many months pregnant? Dennis asked calmly. 9 months, Natalie answered. When did the bleeding start? Tonight, about an hour ago. Location and intensity of pain? Dennis quickly had Natalie lie down on the sofa and began examining her skillfully. Her movements were assured, backed by 32 years of experience. She brought clean towels and carefully assessed Natalie's condition. Dennis declared definitively. There's a possibility of bleeding due to mild placenta previa. Stress may have worsened the condition. You need to go to the hospital immediately. When Vince heard his wife's diagnosis, his expression became even more concerned. Should we call an ambulance? Before that, Dennis took Natalie's hand. Where is your husband? Why are you alone? It's not normal for a woman in late pregnancy to be outside in the middle of the night. Natalie tearfully explained the entire sequence of events. Derek and Patricia's cruel treatment, the planned marriage and abandonment, and tonight's violence. As the story progressed, Vince and Dennis's expressions became increasingly serious. That's domestic violence, Dennis said quietly but firmly. Kicking a pregnant woman and throwing her out of the house, that's not something a human being does. Vince clenched his fists. Having seen many domestic violence scenes during his 35-year career as a firefighter, he understood the severity of this situation all too well. Let's report this to the police, Vince suggested. This is clearly a crime. However, Natalie shook her head. But there's no evidence. They'll say I was mentally unstable. We'll be your witnesses for evidence, Dennis said firmly. A woman in late pregnancy being outside in pajamas at midnight, that itself is evidence of an abnormal situation. Plus, your physical condition will serve as medical evidence. Vince nodded as well. That's right. I've responded to emergencies for 35 years. This situation is clearly abnormal. Let's get a doctor's diagnosis. We can prove the violence occurred. Natalie was encouraged by their words. For the first time, she had met people who would stand by her side. Here was human-like warmth, in stark contrast to Derek and Patricia's cruelty. But I have nowhere to go, Natalie said anxiously. Well then, Dennis smiled. Do you know about the Women's Support Center? There's a facility called a House of Hope. It's a shelter for domestic violence victims with specialized staff. A nurse who was my colleague works there. Vince added. You'll be safe there, and you can consult about legal procedures too. We'll provide full support. We'll testify as witnesses in court as well. A light of hope shone in Natalie's heart for the first time in a long while. This unknown couple was treating her more preciously than her own family. Thank you, Natalie said through tears. For being so kind to me. Why would you go so far? It's only natural, Dennis answered gently. Helping people in trouble is what humans should do. Especially when we see a woman like you who's trying so hard, we can't just look the other way. At that moment, the baby in Natalie's belly moved significantly. As if sensing they had arrived at a safe place. The baby seems relieved too, Dennis smiled. It's okay, both you and your baby will be safe there. Vince stood up. First let's go to the hospital. Then we'll contact House of Hope. You can stay there safely starting tonight. Natalie looked at both their faces. Before her, who had been in the depths of despair just hours ago, a light of hope had suddenly appeared. It was a miracle that came in the form of human goodness. I'm not alone, am I? Natalie murmured. That's right, Vince answered firmly. You're not alone. We're with you. And surely there are others who will help you too. Outside, the cold wind was still blowing, but inside the Hartwell house it was warm and full of hope. Natalie's new life was about to begin this very night. On the way to the hospital in Vince and Dennis's car, Natalie felt complicated emotions, mixing anxiety with hope. Never in her life had she met people who cared so deeply for her. In the warm car with the heater running, she felt a sense of security for the first time in a long while. At Chicago General Hospital's emergency department, Dennis's former colleagues responded quickly. The examination revealed bleeding due to placenta previa, and the baby was safe. However, the doctor didn't miss the traces of violence left on Natalie's body. These bruises? Emergency physician Dr. Chen asked. Natalie hesitated. But Dennis squeezed her hand and nodded encouragingly. My husband kicked me, Natalie answered in a trembling voice. Even though I'm 9 months pregnant. Dr. Chen's expression became stern. This is serious, violent assault. We need to report this to the police. At that moment, Vince stepped forward. We'll serve as witnesses. We'll testify to everything, including the circumstances of protecting her. At midnight. The next morning at the Women's Support Center House of Hope, Natalie took her first step toward a new life. Facility Director Rachel Morrow was a domestic violence victim support specialist, a capable woman with 12 years of experience. You did nothing wrong, Rachel declared. Your husband's actions are clear domestic violence. This constitutes serious criminal behavior. Natalie was confused. She hadn't thought of Derek's actions as DV, but hearing the expert's words, she began to understand how abnormal the situation she had been placed in was. At the House of Hope, there were women in similar circumstances. Each had painful experiences, but they encouraged and supported each other. For Natalie, this community became great emotional support. A week later, labor began. Rachel accompanied her to the hospital, and Vince and Dennis rushed to be there as well. Surrounded by these people who had become so dear to her, Natalie was able to approach childbirth with a sense of security. "You can do it, Natalie," Dennis encouraged her while holding her hand. "You're a strong woman." After long hours of labor, a small baby girl was born. The moment she heard her daughter's first cry, Natalie felt that all her previous suffering had been worthwhile. Natalie named her daughter Isabella. It means a beautiful and blessed child. "You are my hope, Isabella." There was no contact from Derek. Natalie filed the birth certificate alone. But she was no longer alone. Vince, Dennis, Rachel, and her companions at House of Hope had become her new family. 1 month after giving birth, Natalie made a significant decision. She decided to file criminal charges against Derek. Violence against pregnant women could be prosecuted as a serious crime. "This isn't just for you alone," Rachel explained. "This is a fight to reduce the number of women who suffer similar abuse, even by one." The evidence was substantial. Testimony from Vince and Dennis, hospital records, documentation by House of Hope. Furthermore, it was discovered that Natalie's neighbors had witnessed Derek and Patricia's abusive language and intimidating behavior from before. 6 months later, the trial began. Many people who supported Natalie gathered in the courtroom. Vince, Dennis, Rachel, and her companions from House of Hope. She was not alone. Derek and Patricia initially denied the charges. Their lawyer argued it was a minor marital dispute with no criminal nature. However, the evidence on Natalie's side was overwhelming. Vince took the stand as a witness. "I worked as a firefighter for 35 years and participated in many rescue operations," his voice resonated through the courtroom. "I've seen many emergencies. Throwing a pregnant woman out of the house at midnight is an act against humanity. I will never forget how desperate her situation was that night." Dennis also testified. "I worked as an obstetrics nurse for 32 years. I attended thousands of births and saw many pregnant women, but I had never seen a woman placed in such a serious situation. Her physical and emotional wounds were clearly the result of violence." Most impressive was Rachel's testimony. "I've been involved in domestic violence victim support for 12 years, but Natalie's case is particularly malicious. During pregnancy, the time when she should be most protected, she received violence from the person she should trust most. This is a serious violation of women's dignity and human rights." Meanwhile, Derek and Patricia's testimonies were full of contradictions. Derek claimed his wife was mentally unstable, but medical records refuted this. Patricia brazenly stated, "Protecting my son is natural for a mother," but this actually proved their conspiracy. The decisive factor was testimony from neighborhood residents. Multiple residents of Maple Street had found Derek and Patricia unpleasant. "We sometimes heard a woman crying from that house," Mrs. Johnson, one of their neighbors, testified. But the husband explained that she was hysterical from pregnancy. "Now I realize she might have been crying for help." And Patricia made many racist remarks toward Natalie. All the neighbors despised her. On the final day of the trial, Natalie herself took the stand. Holding Isabella, she told her story. "For 3 years, I believed we had married for love." Natalie's voice was quiet but filled with firm conviction. "But it was a planned deception from the beginning. The night I was kicked and thrown out of the house while pregnant, I was completely stripped of my dignity as a human being." She looked around the courtroom. "But at the same time, I realized something. There are good people in this world who will help someone in trouble, even strangers. I'm able to stand here today because of such people." Natalie looked toward Vince and Dennis. Vince and Dennis, who helped me that night. Rachel and my companions at the House of Hope who supported me. They taught me what true love is, extending a helping hand when someone is in trouble. Finally, Natalie turned toward Derek and Patricia. I no longer hate you. But I wanted to reveal the truth through this trial so that other women do not have to go through the same pain. On Judgment Day, the courtroom was filled with tension. Judge Harris read the verdict with a solemn expression. For defendant Derek Anthony Rivera, I sentence him to a maximum of 1 year imprisonment for domestic violence, suspended for 2 years, and a fine of $2,500. For defendant Patricia Eloise Rivera, I sentence her to a fine of $2,500 for conspiracy. Additionally, I issue restraining orders against both defendants from approaching the victim. The judge continued. Violence against pregnant women is an act that society must absolutely not tolerate. This case has become an important one that appeals to society about the seriousness of domestic violence and the importance of victim support. Cheers erupted in the courtroom. Natalie shed tears while holding Isabella tightly. It was a moment when justice had triumphed. As they left the courtroom, Vince and Dennis greeted her. Well done, Vince smiled. You were truly brave. This is the beginning of your new life, Dennis said gently. Natalie looked at the two of them, then down at her newborn daughter. The story that had begun with that desperate night was about to end with hope and victory. Thank you, Natalie said from her heart. Without you, I wouldn't be who I am today. The setting sun illuminated the courthouse windows, promising hope for a new tomorrow. The real life of Natalie and Isabella was about to begin. 10 years had passed since the verdict. Natalie Carmen Rivera is now the director of the Women's Support Center, House of Hope, in Chicago, supporting many domestic violence victims. Her life, which had begun with that desperate night, has become a beacon of hope for many women. Isabella, now 10 years old, has grown into a bright and intelligent girl. With her braided chestnut hair and her large, sparkling brown eyes, she was genuinely proud of her mother's work. On weekends, she often visits House of Hope and plays with the children there. Mama, did someone new come today? Isabella asked as she walked down the facility's hallway. Yes, Natalie answered gently. But it's okay. They're safe here. Isabella nodded quietly. She had gradually been told about the circumstances of her birth, appropriate to her age. Though she couldn't understand at first, she was beginning to comprehend how brave her mother had been. The House of Hope had expanded year by year and now supports over 300 women and children annually. Inspection teams visited from across the nation, and Natalie's initiatives were being introduced as model cases. Natalie herself was giving lectures around the country as a specialist in domestic violence victim support. One autumn afternoon, a letter arrived at Natalie's office. When she saw the sender's name, she gasped. Derek Anthony Rivera. It was the first contact from her ex-husband in 10 years. The letter contained updates on his situation and words of deep apology. To Natalie. I haven't contacted you for a long time. I regret every day what I did to you and our daughter. After the verdict, I underwent long-term counseling and came to understand how wrong my actions were. I also read your book, Embracing Hope, Recovery from Domestic Violence Victim. For the first time, I truly understand how much I hurt you. I have deep respect for your strength and courage. Currently, I work as an instructor in domestic violence perpetrator rehabilitation programs. I speak publicly about my mistakes and warn men who might make similar errors. I believe this is part of my atonement to you and our daughter. I must also report about my mother Patricia. Last year, she was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. The doctors told her she has only a few months to live. Mother deeply regrets her actions and says she wants to apologize to you and our daughter. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just hope that when our daughter asks about her father, you can tell her he's someone who did wrong but is now working toward rehabilitation. Derek. After finishing the letter, Natalie sighed with complicated feelings. Her hatred was gone, but she couldn't immediately forgive them either. However, she could sense that he was seriously working on his rehabilitation. And the news of Patricia's illness disturbed her more than she had expected. That night, Isabella finished her homework and came to the living room. "Mama, you seem tired today." "A little," Natalie smiled. "But I'm okay." "Are you thinking about Dad?" Isabella's perceptiveness surprised Natalie. "Why do you think that?" "Because you always make that face when something difficult happens." Natalie sat next to Isabella. "I got a letter from your father. An apology letter. And news that your grandmother is sick." Isabella thought for a moment before saying, "Grandmother, is she the person who did bad things?" "Yes. But she seems to regret it now." "I want to meet her," Isabella said quietly. "But if you don't want me to, I don't have to." Natalie hugged her daughter. Where does this child's kindness and strength come from? The following week, Vince and Dennis visited the House of Hope. Now 75 and 72 years old respectively, the two were still energetic and continued supporting Natalie's activities. "I got a letter from Derek," Natalie reported to them. "Patricia has terminal cancer." Vince's expression became stern. "No matter what they say, the fact that they hurt you doesn't change." Dennis chose her words carefully. "I think people can change. But trusting them easily is dangerous. Deathbed apologies can sometimes be just to ease one's own guilt." "I know," Natalie nodded. "But Isabella might someday regret not meeting her grandmother." After thinking deeply, Vince said, "If that time comes, we'll be there with you. To protect you and your daughter." Tears welled up in Natalie's eyes. These two loved them more than real family. 2 months later, Natalie made a significant decision. She would allow a meeting with Patricia, just once. This was considering Isabella's desire to meet her grandmother and the hope of seeking reconciliation before death. Patricia, whom they met at the hospital, was emaciated beyond recognition. The once intimidating woman has become frail and wore an expression filled with regret. "Natalie. I didn't think you would come," Patricia's voice was hoarse. "It's for Isabella," Natalie answered calmly. Isabella was nervous at first, but seeing her sick grandmother, she naturally showed kindness. "Grandma, are you in pain?" Tears filled Patricia's eyes. "My heart hurts more than my body. When I think about what I did to you and your mother." "Mama is strong, so she's okay," Isabella said innocently. "Grandma, you have to be strong too." Patricia held her granddaughter's hand. "You're a beautiful child. What I did is unforgivable, but I at least want you to be happy." Natalie sensed Patricia's genuine regret. Her hatred didn't completely disappear, but she also felt pity towards her. "I don't intend to forgive you. You and Derek committed malicious acts that involved a child," Natalie said clearly. "But for Isabella's sake, I allowed this meeting to take place." "I understand," Patricia answered through tears. "But thank you. I'm truly glad I could meet my granddaughter." Patricia died a month later. Natalie and Isabella also attended the funeral. Derek sat in the family section but maintained an appropriate distance from them. After the funeral, Derek approached them. "Thank you for coming," he said sincerely. "Mother was worried about you both until the end." "Are you my daddy?" Isabella asked innocently. Derek knelt down to meet his daughter's eyes. "Yes. But Daddy did bad things and had to live apart from Mama and you. If you apologize, you'll be forgiven," Isabella said matter-of-factly. Derek looked up at Natalie. Natalie, Please give me time, Natalie answered quietly. I can't do it right away, but for Isabella's sake, the day when we can talk might come. A year later, after careful consideration, Natalie decided to begin a limited relationship with Derek. They started with monthly meetings under the supervision of the House of Hope staff. Derek continued serious counseling and his work with domestic violence perpetrator programs. Isabella accepted her father's presence and gradually built a relationship with him. Daddy did bad things before, but he's trying hard to change now, she said. Though Natalie and Derek never reconciled romantically, they were able to build a cooperative relationship as Isabella's parents. His apologies began to feel genuinely heartfelt. When Isabella entered middle school, she shared her future dreams with her mother. I want to work helping people in trouble, like you do, Mom. Natalie felt proud of her daughter. She realized how the story that began with that desperate night is now passing hope to the next generation. One spring day, a graduation ceremony was held at the House of Hope. It was the day when women who had achieved independence over the past year, along with their children, would set off for new lives. Standing to speak at the ceremony, Natalie looked out at the participants. There were expressions filled with hope from women who had overcome despair similar to what she had once experienced. Congratulations, everyone, Natalie said from her heart. Your courage and efforts have brought you to this day. She paused before continuing. I too was once in despair similar to yours. But I'm able to stand before you today because I didn't give up. And because there were people who extended helping hands. Silence filled the venue. Infinite possibilities stretch before you all. Even when difficult times come, you're never alone. We are here. And there's strength within each of you. Applause filled the venue. Among it was the sound of Isabella's clapping hands. After the ceremony, Natalie and Isabella walked through a nearby park. Flower petals danced in the wind, announcing the arrival of a new season. Mom, if that night hadn't happened, we wouldn't be who we are now, would we? Isabella suddenly stopped and said. That's right, Natalie smiled. Maybe our current happiness exists because of the difficult times. Mom, you're strong. It's because I'm not alone. Because you're here, and so many people support us. The sunset shone beautifully in the sky. The two held hands as they headed home. That night in her 9th month of pregnancy, Natalie had been at the bottom of despair. But by crawling up from there, she had gained encounters with many people, her daughter's growth, and a truly meaningful life. New residents still arrive at the House of Hope today. Their faces show the same despair that Natalie once wore. But Natalie knows that no matter how dark the night may be, morning always comes. My story is not particularly special. But it is also proof that one woman can overcome difficulties and build a new life. Now I can say it, being thrown out of that house that night was the beginning of a new life. And this story continues even now. My daughters. And my journey never stops, continuing to light the flame of hope for many people. Derek now contributes to society by sharing his mistakes. Patricia showed deep regret at the end and found salvation in the brief time with her granddaughter before departing. She taught us that people can change even at death's door. But most importantly, hope is being passed to the next generation. Isabella is growing up learning love and strength while carrying the burden of a complex family history. When night breaks, a new day begins again. From the windows of the House of Hope, morning light streams in. That light brings the miracle called hope to women in despair. Hope, no matter how small, becomes the light that illuminates the darkest night. From Natalie's diary.